So I think, as I look back across, my career in the last, call it 10 to 15 years, the biggest challenges were in my own head of like, how do I actually view the current situation that I'm in? And being vulnerable with the people that I trust the most to say like, look, this is hard. Right. And I
Yeah.
need some support in this moment. And it won't always last that way. But the biggest challenge was between my ears most of the time of over analyzing things and not realizing that like, look, it's just a season in your life and it all passes.
94, 94, yeah, this more than 94. This is more than 94, yeah, this more than 94, 90, more than 94, yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back to More Than 94, where we're all about helping athletes transition into professional life beyond sports. I'm your host, NeNe, and today's episode is brought to you by an incredible initiative that's making waves at HBCUs across the country, Project Courage. Project Courage, powered by Matrix Fitness, is empowering students and professionals at the 107 historically black colleges and universities to explore careers in the fitness and wellness industry. Their program's mission is to create opportunities for the underrepresented through authenticity, generosity, and engagement. That's courage. They are opening doors, elevating voices, and providing real world experience to students and graduates, making sure that the next generation of health and wellness professionals truly reflect the diversity of our world. As a former collegiate athlete, I know firsthand how important it is to find your passion after sports. Fitness has always been a part of my journey, and Project Courage is showing young people at HBCUs that there are so many opportunities out there, whether that's in training, sports science, wellness, entrepreneurship, or beyond. So, whether you're a student or a professional looking to connect with others in the industry, or even just curious about what's possible, Project Courage has your back. It's about more than just finding a job, it's about finding your calling and making an impact. So we'll be diving into today's episode shortly, but before we do, I just want to give a huge thanks to Project Courage for sponsoring this episode and supporting our mission here at More Than 94. What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of More Than 94, where athletes redefine success. Today's guest, we have Corey Leonard. He's an alumni of Arkansas State University. He's also a Hall of Famer at Arkansas State University. He has 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, which he helps he co-parents with his ex-wife in Nashville, Tennessee. He is currently the chief commercial officer for Buckeye Partners, an energy infrastructure company. Welcome, Corey, to More Than 94.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on More Than 94. And so basically, the gist of it is, highlighting those stories of people doing exceptional outside of sports and competing in the whatever it's corporate America, your own business, and just sharing stories about that, because most of the time, even if you go pro and you finish and you got the basketball you got to stop playing a sport at one point in time. So you got to go be professional in something else, because that you're gonna have to stop bouncing the ball, stop catching the ball, stop throwing the ball at one point in some time in your career.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
There's no doubt about that. So can you just walk us through like how you even got involved with playing sports, and if football was even your first love, your first sport?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because football wasn't right. I didn't start playing football until I was about in 9th grade, and the only reason I started playing was because I lost a bet with a coach on how many times I could juggle a soccer ball at school, and they convinced me to try out for the football team, and then obviously that led to what it did. But I was a pretty big baseball player all growing up. I grew up in a family with a lot of athletes. All my uncles, grandpas were all athletes. My brothers and sisters were all athletes. So definitely got brought up in a really competitive family, and sports were kind of that way to really just bring out the best in you and get kind of the team camaraderie and go just kind of be competitive across your personal life. And then football came on very late when I was in high school, so definitely part of it, but didn't happen until late in life.
Gotcha. Can you kind of explain so walk us through that? You said you didn't get, because nowadays you got kids playing at 5, finding that one sport, but like catching on late, like being football late and then getting a scholarship to Arkansas State.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what I always I tell kids this all the time. I tell my kids this all the time is that look, if you're an athlete and you're a competitor, it doesn't matter what it's in. Like you just go compete, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in the classroom, whether it's on the athletic field, whether it's just being a good person, right? Like you just compete with yourself to be, as good of a person as you can. And so, football to me was interesting because I didn't play it a lot growing up, and then when I
Yeah.
started in high school, it was like this team sport that I had never experienced. Right, it was really physical, it was really mental, and it was all the preparation prior to the games where you built these relationships with your teammates that I found to be like really really addictive. Right, it was like
Yeah.
the off season training. You were challenging each other. I just fell in love with it, and so to me. The game days were, I mean, they were fun, but it was everything else that went around it that really got me hooked into football. And I was fortunate where I played with a lot of really good players as a ninth grader, and so I had the chance to start varsity as a ninth grader. And I wasn't asked to do a lot. There was a lot of good players, so I just had to manage things, and so it let me kind of grow and develop into the player I was by the time I was a junior and a senior when I had more college interest at that period of time. So it was just a really cool experience coming because football is really the only sport that kind of has that kind of physical aspect to it for boys at least
Yeah.
compared to say basketball and baseball, all of which I had played growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, what having that sports background, can you tell me anything like that prepared you for like life?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just that like everything is nothing's given, right? And
Right.
it really comes down to are you willing to outwork everybody else, right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing in athletics as it is when you get post athletics, right? It's tough because especially when you play high school or college, and then you don't have some big illustrious professional career, right? Where that's what you do
Mm-hmm.
for a living. It's hard because you go through an identity crisis at first, right? Where for
Yes.
15 years, right, the only thing that you've been doing is playing sports, and so that's what people know you for. That's what they
Yep.
kind of, attach you to. And all of a sudden, you have to go out and compete in this world that you really haven't been prepared for. And so, the approach that I just always took is, the only thing I could control was my work ethic and being prepared for opportunities. And so, I had the chance, early on in my career to step into the energy world. And again, didn't know a lot about it, but
Yeah.
like anything else, I just said, look, I can only control my effort and how much time and attention I give to it. And so I just tried to do that relentlessly early on in my career, which really helped me, propel myself for the back end of it.
No, that's good. That's good to know. Um, and with that energy, like, what are some of like with that sports background? And I'm gonna back up for a little bit because you said that you wouldn't hold a lot of pairs. So in college, um, just because I know this information a little bit, I think you graduated early and was grad school and stuff like that. So were you able to do like anything outside of sports? So, like regular students get to go do like, internships or any of that. You weren't able to do any of that at Arkansas State, even though you kind of was like graduated early
No, so
and stuff.
you know how it is, right? Is you don't really have time, right?
No,
It's
you don't.
because any free time you have is dedicated to the sport, right? So if it's off season, it's about training, it's about rehab, and you're doing so much on your own time, even when the coaches aren't around. But you also know the coaches expect you to be doing that. So you don't really have much
Overtime.
time in college to go do internships. But the one thing that you do have a lot of time to do if you're an athlete is to understand the value of a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, looking at relationships when you're an athlete in college, the thing I see a lot from players today is they leave at surface level,
Yep.
right? So that they know people in the organization or the university, but they don't take the time to really get to know them at a fundamental level because it's that relationship that will help propel you when you get done playing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that relationship will only pay dividends if they feel like you invested in them more than a surface level too.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing I would give advice to all athletes is look, it's hard to find time to intern and to go create those professional skills, but the things that you can advance yourself on is the understanding of the value of relationships and being very, very prepared for that after so that you have some advantages to try to help propel your career in whatever field you want to focus on.
Yeah, that's true because even though you're an athlete, so you're really not focused on that so hard. Like, so we had the Boreal Mile. We of course we hated it, but when you say relationships, those boosters, those people come out all the time just to watch us run. And so if we like take those like certain situations seriously and actually talking more to them, you never know. Like I had worked for the coaches, now ex-wife, but after college worked for her just because again building those relationships and talking to them because I know and you 16, or 17, 18 years old, you're just like, why are they out here watching us run? Like, this is stupid. Like, but looking back, and it's hard because you're 18 years old. It's hard to have that kind of mindset about getting those relationships with those boosters, because more than likely they have a business or something that could help you after sports or help you get a job after sports. So it's hard to kind of like think about that stuff at that age if you're not mature enough to know some of those things. And so,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, look, obviously we're all later on in life now. We have kids, both of us. And,
yeah,
look, taking time, away from all the things that you have with a family on a Saturday
yes,
to go, be a part of something like that or go to a college football game. Like, I've probably been to 4 since I've got done playing. And you would think that I'd be there a lot, but it's like, it's really just hard, right? It's
yeah,
hard with the conflicts of other time. So if those people are out there, it's telling you that they're vested in you, in the program. And so, like, don't pass that opportunity up because it's a great
yeah,
audience for you to understand what that value of the relationship could be.
for sure, for sure. So, backtrack just a little bit. What was the energy field, the first field, like the first thing you took after college, or was it something else? What kind of like took you to in that
Yeah, no,
direction?
I had
Just
no
energy.
idea. I was trying to figure out life like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So I got done playing and did like the athletic training for a couple years
Okay.
with a local hospital in Jonesboro and some of the orthopedic doctors that I had relationships with, which was great
Yeah.
because it kind of helped me get kind of kicked off on my feet, and then kind of quickly realized like, all right, well, in this field, I'm only going to make as much money as I have time in the day because they're really paying for access to me to train them. And yeah, obviously I had 2 undergrad degrees and an MBA. And so I started to really focus in on like, all right, how do I utilize these degrees I have?
Mm-hmm.
And so moved back home, was working with my dad with a family business doing insurance claims. And finally just dedicated like 3 months where I was like, you know what, I'm going to get my resume where it should be. And I'm just going to start applying to any job I can and see what happens. And for about 3 months, every night, for 2 hours or so, I must have applied to 1,000 jobs. And randomly, a company out of South Louisiana called me. I had no idea what they did, and they ended up being a big joint venture of a couple major oil companies that did transportation of crude oil. They stored it, imported it, exported it, and they called and said, "Hey, we like your leadership background. We like your experience, in the athletic field. We think those are good leadership qualities,
There
and
you
we're
go.
going to give you a shot."
Yeah.
And that's all I was looking for was the shot. And I took that opportunity, and then obviously built a career off of that. So, I would love to tell people I had this great blueprint, knew what I was going to do. It's the exact opposite. I had no idea and was just
Yeah.
trying to find a chance to start something that I thought was going to be meaningful.
So with that, you kind of hit on a little bit of like your challenges and stuff like that. So how do you think having that background of an athlete kind of helped you, just do it and just go
Well,
out,
I
put
think that's
yourself
the key
out there
term.
to go.
Yeah, that's the key term is just like, look, just do it. Like, don't
Yeah.
overthink it. Don't feel like you need to actually have a plan for like the entire pathway of what your life's going to be like,
Yeah.
because you're never going to know, and
No.
you're never going to know what's going to come to you. It's like,
Mhm.
just start doing things that you know are going to be constructive to what the ultimate goal is of you finding some level of success or financial independence or whatever that driver is you have.
Mhm.
Don't spend too much time thinking too much. Just start actions and start doing things, and then just tell yourself the only thing that you can control is how hard you work, and put your head down, outwork everybody else around you, and value people that you work with, because ultimately if you're going to be successful, it's going to be because other people around you were in that pathway with you and on that journey, and you
Yeah.
have to make sure you take the time to appreciate it.
Good. That's good for sure. Um, and that, yes, for sure. But can you talk to like the person? Let's see, that you know maybe like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying, Corey. But I know I'm I'm going to the league.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, everybody thinks they're going to go to the league, and look, and you should never not have that aspiration, right? Like, if you're a competitor and you're going to compete, you should absolutely feel like you're going to go professional. I thought I was going to have a 20-year career and be the next Joe Montana. All right, like, trust me, I was right there with you. But the one thing that I think that all people should do is you don't have to necessarily have a backup plan,
Mhm.
but understand that if things become different than what you believe that they may, make sure you're prepared for them, right? So prepare yourself for multiple pathways. That way, if a change occurs, it doesn't completely shut you down. You're just pivoting, right? But the effort and the attention's still there because you always were prepared for that. If something did change, you knew how to handle it. So, and I would also tell everybody is, look, nothing's a true loss, right? Everything's just a learning experience, right? So even though you don't feel like you didn't end up with the pathway that you wanted,
Right.
if you embrace it to be a learning example, take what you learned from that failure and then allow it to, really motivate you and take those lessons learned to apply it to whatever's next. Because sometimes it's the losses that we learn the most about ourselves and kind of how to approach the future on.
For sure, for sure. I had a moment about that. Not that I wanted to go to the league, but just in life in general, like losses and like challenges in life. You just like, dang, that and stuff that just don't really matter sometimes. Um, Walk us through like some of your biggest challenges professionally and how you overcame some of that stuff and like what you did to overcome any of the challenges that you face professionally or personally, and how you think, and it may or may not have, sports contributed to how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the thing that I learned probably later on in life that I wish I could tell my younger self is especially for a guy, but I think for all athletes in general is like it's completely okay to be vulnerable, right? Like if you spend so much time trying to act like things don't bother you, that they
Yeah.
don't have an impact, the problem is you're actually limiting your own growth. And you're also limiting, right, the ability to expand relationships around you, which end
Yeah.
up being some of the biggest drivers that you have. And so, look, there really were no professional barriers that weren't personal and none that were personal that weren't professional, because at the end of the day, people can say that you have like a professional life and a personal life, but you really don't. You just have life,
Yeah.
right? Like you have a finite amount of resource every day that you can apply to whatever it is that you deal with.
True.
And so, look, I've obviously I was married young, and that marriage didn't end up working out, and I have 4 kids that are amazing from it. They have an amazing mom, but obviously when that process occurred, like that was a huge challenge for me
Yeah.
at a hard stage in my life, and that affects the professional kind of focus that you can have too. So I think, as I look back across, my career in the last, call it 10 to 15 years, the biggest challenges were in my own head of like, how do I actually view the current situation that I'm in? And being vulnerable with the people that I trust the most to say like, look, this is hard, right? And I
Yeah.
need some support in this moment. And it won't always last that way. But the biggest challenge was between my ears most of the time of over analyzing things and not realizing that like, look, it's just a season in your life and it'll all pass. But don't try to ignore it because there's so much growth to be had there.
Yeah.
And that's what people, I think, they lose sight of sometimes.
No, for sure. That's the same for me. Like it's okay. You you wish you would have did it earlier, but it's like okay, it doesn't bother me, whatever. Like, and it does, but
Yeah.
you don't want to seem as weak or whatever. Don't want to be vulnerable when people know. And so my thing was like, if I tell somebody all this, they might use it against me later. Like today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors, Gearhead Outfitters of Jonesboro, Arkansas. Whether you're looking for the best outdoor gear, activewear, or perfect pair of shoes, Gearhead Outfitters has you covered. With top brands and expert staff, they make sure you're ready for your next adventure, whether it's hiking, running, or just being active. Gearhead Outfitters believes in supporting local communities, and just like More Than 94, they're all about helping you reach your full potential. Visit them in-store or online at gho.com. Again, gho.com for all your outdoor needs. Big thank you to Gearhead Outfitters for supporting athletes redefining success beyond the game. Now let's jump back in to today's episode. It's like,
Yeah.
so that's like kind of the stories we create for ourselves, and it may never even happen. So that's good because you do like that stuff happens.
And that's a great example too, where it's like, look, that is a risk, right? Being vulnerable, there's always a risk that someone could utilize that against you and hit you when you're down.
Yep.
Other way to look at that is that if that person did take advantage of that situation and they showed you that version of them, you now have no doubt in your mind that person is not meant to be there, right? Moving forward, right? So
No.
you kind of have the silver lining the whole time of figuring out. It's like, look, be vulnerable, take risks. Know that they may go south, but you're going to learn a lot in that, and sometimes that ends up helping propel you, much further than you ever expected. But you wouldn't have got there unless you took the risk of being vulnerable to begin with.
No, that is true. That's true. I wish I would have been more vulnerable younger, or in college. And I think we just don't have that. I don't know if they have it now with all the mental health stuff going on, but I feel like when you were older than me. I was a freshman when you were a senior, but like the resources for that anyway, or like the space to anybody was talking about being vulnerable until later down the line. I feel like now they have like people on staff to make sure these kids have good mental health, or they've created those positions for like teams now.
Yeah,
I
I
feel
mean,
like we
look,
just
my
have to get
son goes.
figured out.
Yeah, my son goes to boarding school and he's a baseball player at IMG Academy down in South Florida. And I
Oh,
mean, one
okay.
of the reasons, right? I mean, he's a very good athlete and we've always supported him. He's been very dedicated to the sport. But one of the things that is just amazing of what they have down there is that he has mental health coaches and kind of intellectual performance classes that are happening
Right.
multiple times a week at such a young age, and we love it because it's like, look, that's a major part of growth and the
It
challenges
is.
that kids run into, and even adults, and that they're putting those resources, available to kids at such a young age. In my mind, it's just a huge benefit because look, the reality is life's tough, right? It just is, right? And
That
you
for
gotta
sure.
you have to be prepared for it. And so, I think a lot of parents at times try to shelter their kids because they love them so much. But I also say, look, don't steal that opportunity for them to, gain some toughness because life's coming, and the more you steal it from them, the less they're prepared for it.
Yes, yes, for sure. Um, and how did y'all come up with the? Now I'm just being nosy, but like, how did y'all come? Is he come up with the decision? Because I've heard of that school, the school in South Florida. Is South Florida right?
Yeah, yeah.
The IMG. So how did y'all decide? I mean, obviously you got to be good, but like sending your kid, like that's a big, like that's big to send your kid off to be boarding school under somebody else's care.
Yeah, I mean, look, hardest decision I've ever made as a parent. I mean, my kids, Griffin's only 12, right? And
Yeah.
so, to think about, enjoying parenthood so much and then and look, a lot of the time that he and I spent together, right, was around sports and athletics. That was a lot of our common ground. So then to send your kid off, for what you believe is right for him and his journey at the detriment of you not having that time and experience with him was really, really tough.
Yeah.
But what we did was, we sent him down there for 2 weeks for him to stay down there in the summer. They had a chance to evaluate him. They had kind of been recruiting him throughout the summer. And then we went down, for one day where he had to work out in front of like 6 coaches, and it was just him. And it was like one of the toughest workouts I've ever seen him get put through. And the coaches came to us after and said, "Look, he's got all the things that we think are appropriate, and you guys, if you want, like we would love to have him here." And they gave him a scholarship for it, and so we came back as a family. His mom definitely tougher than I was, and she was like, "Look, I know this is right for him, and like we need to commit to this." A little bit harder for me initially to kind of get through it, but ultimately just felt like, look, this is his passion. This is
Yeah.
kind of what journey he wants to set out on, and who am I to try to limit him if he's prepared for it? So we took the step and let him do it, and he's loved it every day since.
Yeah, that's good. And I think moms, they know. Sometimes they just know. It's like, yeah. And
Sure. Yeah.
if
Look, you got to listen to moms. Moms always know, right? It's
they
tough for
know.
dads, but like at the end of the day, most of the
They
time they
know.
have a better pulse.
Yeah, they know. They know. They just, like I feel like you know you're a kid. Like me, I have an
Yeah.
older brother that's 9 years older than me, and we were total opposites. My mom was like, I had to worry about your brother because you just a little wild. But he's like, I knew you wouldn't doing nothing crazy. She's like, I just know you just know your kid. So
Yeah.
that's good that he's matured enough to go down there, and that's great. Um, what are some things that you can just talk about as far as like being a collegiate athlete that you wish, some things that you should have known while being a collegiate athlete, to hope that would have prepared you for real life? You hit on a few of them, but anything else that you wish you would have known that would have better prepared you for leaving college?
Yeah, you know what? I think, looking at, I'll just be completely honest, right? I mean, I was the quarterback at Arkansas State and I was the starter for 4 years, right? So, you get the benefit of 4 years of people telling you how great you are. And,
Yeah.
you walk into places and everybody recognizes you, right? You get this sense of entitlement a little bit, right? And you get this sense of, I'd say, probably inflated value of yourself. And the reality there is that, look, it's temporary, right? Like that value is because of what you play in college, and when you come out, you're going to have a completely different world that you're coming into, right? Where you're going to look at trying to compete to create value for companies and organizations,
Yeah.
and some guy that you've never heard of, that was never an athlete, they may be creating 3x the value you are, and guess what? It's all the metrics that you were used to competing, they don't matter here, right? So it's really about understanding that, like, there's a lot of things to learn in college and in athletics, and it's the competition and hard work side.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no structural advantage you get from being an athlete more than the relationship side. And if you haven't invested in that the right way, it can be a rude awakening when you get out to try to go create a career for yourself.
No, for sure. I used to try to tell my teammates, like, listen, after this is over, like, you got to know, like, how you do it, like, how you do it is like what is it? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I'm just like, if y'all can't do this right or fall in love with the process of doing something, like, you got to go into this real world again. Like you said, you're competing. Like, nobody cares that you were a 4-year, a Hall of Famer or whatever at your job. Like, nobody cares about that. I mean, unless they followed you your whole career or something. But, like, no, an employer doesn't care about that at all. So you're right. Like, so how do you create value? How do you transfer those skills of, being a hard worker, falling in love with the process? That kind of, those intangibles matter, or you can put them in place in corporate America or wherever you do. But, like, again, that I like being that guy to, like, going to work and it's like, you're just Corey. Like,
You're just a guy. You're just a guy, right? I mean, you
yeah,
may be a little bit taller than some of your peers. You may be a little
right.
bit more in shape, but besides that, that's about it.
Yeah,
That's the only
I
difference.
had my parents are good at basically telling me that, like, when you get to college, like, all the girls came from or were the best on their team. So, like, I never had the identity crisis so much. I did struggle with, obviously, like, not having to play basketball anymore, but, like, knowing, like, I'm just a normal person that happens to play basketball, blah, blah, blah. So I never really struggled, but I seen a lot of my teammates, like, struggle with that. Like now I'm the feeling like they were nobody when really you are somebody, but, like, that sports background, it only takes you so far, and not to just be so it's hard to say, but not to find your whole identity in that sport, in which I feel like
Yeah.
the reason for the podcast is, like, we've struggled with that at some point in our life, of that switching from that identity of athletes, and now I'm a mom, 2 kids, a wife, like, switching identities and the different roles that you play now. So
Yeah, I mean, if you look too in this, and look, and I'm not, this isn't scientific whatsoever. I'm not in the medical field, so again, no one read too much into this, right? But the CTE stuff started coming in a lot, right, when we were getting done with college, and the thing I've always said is, look, I think CTE and the impacts are definitely, they're medically factual, right, and it is something that needs to be paid attention to. But to your earlier point, the thing is it's amplified by the fact that these are massive identity crisis years for athletes, right? It's like, especially when you look at TV and social media, right? Like, everybody tells you how great you are and you've got this platform and all this stuff. And if your last game was on a Saturday and you're not going pro, come Sunday morning, like, you don't have to go to the facility anymore, right? Like, maybe to get your stuff out the locker in, like, a black garbage bag, but it's like, that's it, right? And all of a sudden it's like, no one prepared you for that last game.
no.
You're preparing to play the game, but no one that week was saying, all right, but listen, after that Saturday game, you're no longer the quarterback here. You're no longer the athlete here. You're no longer the guy you've been for 15 years of your life. You're just an average, person that's trying to figure out their own pathway. And when you combine that with the fact that there are, certain medical conditions that athletes put themselves within, to me, like, that was the thing that was always missing in the stories around all the CTE stuff. Is I'm like, look, I'm not denying that, but I'm like, look, man, the mental side of this is so challenging, just on its own merits. It's like, don't forget that these people just need someone to talk to help work through a change in their life that, like, no one's really prepared for unless you've been an athlete.
Yes, for sure. And a little bit can carry over, because I I've been around certain people that even it can carry on, like, you know, you're used to being that guy. And I guess because we live in College Station and it's a little Aggie town and it's a whole nother type of atmosphere here. But like I even see like people that own businesses and CEOs that still kind of struggle with that identity. Like I was that man, but now that I own XYZ business, that they still kind of struggle with that. Like even if their business is doing well or they got X amount of businesses or 10 or 13, like they still walk around like, not saying that you should never diminish yourself as a human being, but like you could just still kind of see that they struggle with that identity. Like they think that people still should kind of, you know, we were catered to a little bit, like, and so it's kind of weird to see people that are far removed from the sport that still struggle with that identity crisis. Like you're like 40 pushing 50 and I'm just like, guys, and it's not funny, but it's like sad to see like you're much more than what you been catching a football and, you know, shooting a shot. Like you're so much more than that, and you've accomplished a lot of stuff outside of that, and it's still like it's never enough. And so that's why it's saddening to see like when is enough is enough. Like you're still striving for those accolades, not because you want to be a billionaire, but just because it's just like it's something missing that you keep wanting to do X amount of things, and it's
Yeah, I
tough.
mean, look, and at the end of the day, that there's never an amount of money that you make that's like you feel fulfilled, right? Like
Yeah,
money is just a scoreboard, right? For a lot of people, right? It's just how you're gauging if you're being successful or not, but it doesn't determine happiness, right? And the thing that I've learned, the hard way, right, through different challenges personally, is that your sense of fulfillment has to come from you, right? Like if you're looking externally for people to kind of help you validate
yeah,
yourself in different lenses, it's like you will be searching for that relentless. And it's really tough. And one of the things that I think is really tough, even for me, right, is if people think they're like, no, I've got good value myself. Like, all right, here's a challenge: go rent a cabin somewhere off in the middle of the woods, turn your phone off, and stay there for 3 days by yourself, right? Like if you can't access anything externally and you can find just 3 days with yourself, internalize it, and find a level of peace and enjoyment, you're in a good spot.
yeah,
But 99% of people that I know will last 10 hours. And then
yeah,
they're gonna find their phone, they're gonna go do something, they're going to go, drive off, because we tend to look outside of ourselves for validation. And everybody does it, right?
yeah.
Everybody does.
To a certain
And
degree,
it's
yes. Yeah.
yeah, it's a constant battle that we all have to find things. And I think when you get older, people lean heavily into money, thinking that that's going to help. And I'm like, look, there's never enough that you make, because you're always just thinking that the next tranche of it's going to make you happier than you are today.
Yeah, that's so true. No, for sure. And that's real good, Corey. Can you like kind of explain like what would you tell a Corey Leonard that's leaving Arkansas State? Their last game is this season, or their last season is this season. What are some things that you would tell him?
You know what? I mean, the biggest thing would just be like, look, man, just live in the present, like live in
Yeah,
that day, right? Don't look back in the past and try to reminisce too much. Don't try to figure too much into the future. Just enjoy that moment with the people that are around you for what it is, because no matter how much you think that you're going to prepare for the future, you don't know what's going to come tomorrow. You don't know the changes that are going to occur.
yep,
If I could go back and do it all over again, right, it would just be to just be more present in every moment, right, with teammates. And
yeah,
I can still remember literally, just walking to the calf trying to catch Chick-fil-A before they closed to get grilled
right,
chicken breasts that were discounted, so we had food for the weekend, and we could make lettuce wraps, right? Like I missed those moments, and
yeah,
I wish I would have valued them more,
hmm,
because life comes at you fast when you leave, and it's like, look, you don't have to rush to it. That tomorrow's going to come if you're fortunate to have it and God gives it to you. And it's like, besides that, just live in the moment.
yes, that's right. We have to be reminded, even as a after that, like even with being with kids, just being present in that moment, and it's hard when you're an athlete. Again, you're just ready. Like I'm going to practice. I'm going to the calf. I'm going to bed. Like I got to start this thing again in the morning. So it's just like you do kind of miss out on things when you're not being present. When you're just worried about what's your next thing to do. And so that's good advice. What are some, I don't know, words of encouragement or anything inspirational that you may want the listeners, and anything that you want them to take from this episode? Like, what do you want people to hear from this episode?
I mean, look, if there's anything, there's two main themes that I try to kind of live by. Is one is that, look, again, it's the vulnerability thing. Is like, don't be afraid to show that you failed at times, right? It's all your growth will come from it. You don't really grow when you're successful, because that's just the end result of the things that you learned when you weren't successful. So embrace failing when you do. Recognize that things are always going to be hard, right? And accept them for what they are. Enjoy that they're hard. Enjoy that they are a challenge to you, and surround yourself by great people in that process, because great people will get you through anything. People that are not meant to continue to travel with you along your journey, like, they will naturally fall off. Like, let them fall off.
Yeah.
Don't try to hold relationships that shouldn't be there. And probably the other thing is, like, look, don't be afraid of confrontation, right? I mean, I say this all the time, is I don't ever look for confrontation, but I don't mind it, right? And you kind of have to, you've got to be comfortable with confrontation across your life, because you're going to have those moments where you do have to put your foot down and stand for yourself and what you believe in and what you think's right. And look, create that self-respect for you and the people that care about you. Don't be afraid of confrontation, because it's going to come. And people will value you more knowing that you stand for something that's meaningful, along your journey. And, like, if you can kind of do those two things, I think life ends up being okay. It'll always be tough, right? But it's always manageable, and you'll find the things to enjoy in it.
Yeah, that's true. So, and when you talk about confrontation, that's just like, I was that, like, I'm like you said, never shy away from confrontation. I never was really, like, looking for it, but I've always been the one to be like, you have to address the situation. And so that can go, so I have to say that can go both ways, because, like, I've always been called, like, even though I stood up for myself, I had teammates who be like, oh, NeNe, can you go do this, that, and other? Because they knew that they would listen to me. But then on the flip side, it's just like, oh, she the troublemaker. And it's not really that I was trying to be a troublemaker. It's just like I had boundaries, and I stood on what I stood on. And so for me, when you say that's good, because I've always preached that, like it's okay to like, it's okay to address that confrontation. That means that stuff is getting done or progress is being made. Because if you don't address it, or if you're not, like, addressing that confrontation, it's just like, everybody's looking around the room like, oh, you're going to say something. The issue never gets resolved, whatever that conversation may be.
I think you said it right? It's boundaries, right? At the end of the day, it's like, look, it's not about who's right or wrong. Most of the time when there's confrontation, it's that, look, I have a set of boundaries, and I need you to respect them. And if you do something that I feel like disrespects them, we have a confrontation. It doesn't mean that it's going to be something that escalates. It's just, it's a moment in time where I'm saying the boundaries that I've set for myself that I think are appropriate and healthy, you're now impending on them. And now we have an issue, right? And so I need to make sure that you understand that those boundaries are set for a reason. And that's just in life in general, in friendships, in your relationships, in your professional relationships. And that's why I said, like, it's not meant to, to be kind of this antagonist to people. It's meant to just say, look, be convicted in what you believe in. And if someone challenges that, you have to be willing to kind of stand your ground and say, look, like, these are my boundaries. And if you're going to coexist in the world that I live in and be involved, like, you're going to have to respect them one way or another. So, never shy away from who you are and the identity that you want to create, because it's the only thing that makes you you.
Yep, that's true. Well, Corey, that's it. Well, that's all the questions I have today. It was really good. Yeah, get some good points. Is there if anybody wants to reach out to you, what are some social media handles that you have that if anybody wants to reach out to you?
So honestly, I'm not a huge social media guy. Because of my career, but I do have an Instagram. I've got kids, so I try to post my kids on there so other family around the country can see them. I think my Instagram handle is just at Corey, so it's Corey, and then GCCG for my kids. It's Griffin, Charlie, Channing, and Graham.
Okay.
So if anybody wanted to reach me, that would be the one social media platform I have for sure.
All right. Well, that's it, Corey. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If I'ma start it, you know I'ma finish it. I'ma show all of you folk with the businesses. Walk